Hi guys, welcome to episode 4 of Sketch Support. This month I've got a new free 2-page sketch for you. You'll find the link for it down below in the description. And while you're looking for that link, don't forget to go ahead and hit subscribe as well. This time I have created 5 layout examples, all based on that same sketch. The point of this video series is to show you how to take a sketch and adapt it to fit your needs. You can easily change the photos, certain design elements, or the theme of the sketch to better fit your photos, your theme, and your style of scrapbooking. Sketches are a valuable tool, and once you learn how to take full advantage of them and what they can offer, you'll love using them. So I'm running another challenge and giveaway. You can find the details for that at the end of this video and then down below in the video description as well. I'm having so much fun seeing how you guys adapt the sketch and what you create based on it. So I want to keep this challenge going each month. Last month there were, I believe, 35 layouts that were shared, and they were all completely different and really shared a lot of great ideas on how to use this sketch. It really kind of blew me away. I would find myself stopping at a layout and saying, what an awesome idea. I can't wait to see what you guys do with this sketch too. Okay, I've rambled on long enough. Let's go ahead and get started with a quick look at the sketch for this video. This sketch is a good example of one of my favorite go-to design concepts. I like having a line of pictures centered across the layout and then creating a background behind the photos. I never really get tired of this design or feel like it's overused because there are so many different ways that you can play around with just this simple concept, and every time you use it, it looks completely different. For the background, there are vertical strips that are grouped together to create one large background. On top of that group of strips, there are 4 3x5-inch photos and a 6x5-inch piece that are arranged in the middle of those background strips. They are grouped together so that each side of the layout will have equal widths of this middle element. On the right side, there are the 3 photos that are combined to have the 9-inch width, and then on the left side there's 1 photo and then that rectangle piece that have a combined 9-inch width, so you have a nice balance on the page. The rectangle piece is used to highlight the title, the journaling, and a few smaller photos. This is also the only area on the sketch where there are embellishments. When you have a background made up of multiple strips in multiple colors and multiple patterns, you have to be careful that it doesn't become too overwhelming if you start adding in lots of embellishments on top of that. A lot of times it's easy for those embellishments to just end up lost in all of it. I thought keeping those embellishments in this center area and arranging them around the title and the journaling helped them stand out, plus help bring attention to the title and the journaling. With the first layout, I followed the sketch pretty closely. I've got the same vertical strips for my background. I've got 3x5-inch photos with a rectangle piece, my title, my journaling, a smaller photo, and my embellishments are all on that rectangle piece. It's a very close representation of the sketch. However, I did make a few small changes to fit what I was working with. I've told you guys this in previous videos, but just in case you don't know, most of the time when it comes to selecting the photos for sketch support layouts, I use photos that I have already printed. I have a couple of photo boxes that sit on my table full of ready to go photos, so I can easily just grab a set of photos and start creating. I try to pick photos that I've already printed because I like to show you guys that you can pretty much make any set of photos work with any sketch. Maybe not always, but most of the time you can make it work. It usually just takes some adjustments here and there. So I had this set of 5 3x5 inch photos of my son on his dad's shoulders. For the most part, these photos are a perfect fit for this sketch. I needed 4 3x5 inch photos and I had 5. So this worked for most of the sketch, but I didn't have any smaller photos that would work for the 2x2 inch photos on the sketch. So I made the choice to remove the bottom 2x2 inch photo, and then I used a 3x3 inch photo that I had cut from that 5th 3x5 inch photo that I had left over, and used it in place of the top 2 2x2 inch photos. Substituting a larger photo in place of 2 smaller photos is always a great option for adjusting things to fit what you are working with. The second biggest change I made was to this middle rectangle piece. On the sketch, it's a 6x5 inch piece. I had a 6x4 inch card from Simple Stories that I really wanted to use here. I liked the dark wood color and felt like it coordinated well with everything else. Plus, I really wanted to use the Good Day Sunshine as my title. Sometimes I will opt to use cards with quotes and phrases and large words as my title. Title design can be complicated sometimes, so when I can use something like a card or die cut that will save me some time and effort in that area, I will hands down go for it. The problem I ran into, if I had just used the card alone, I would have these goofy looking gaps above and below the card. My simple solution was to add a 1/2 inch strip above and below the card. The combined measurements of the card and the 2 strips come out to be 6x5 inch, just like the rectangle on the sketch. The last change I made was to the elements on top of the rectangle piece. Since I used the print on the card as my title, I had to move things around a little bit to better fit on that rectangle. I moved the photo so that it was just above the title, and then I used my journaling strips to fill in the space between the photo and the title. To me, the most important part of arranging the title and the photo and the journaling is to keep them all close together. I like grouping important elements together to help bring attention to those elements that you want people to see. Then to finish the layout, I added some clusters of embellishments in the corners. I used a mix of flower stickers, pinwheels, lemons, and word stickers. I added a little bit of glitter to the lemons and the center of the flowers to give a little pop of color and sparkle to those pieces. Whenever I look at a sketch and see a large background, whether it's made up of vertical strips, horizontal strips, circles, or a solid piece, I see it all as interchangeable. I look at it as one piece as a whole and ask myself, what can I do differently to fill that same space? There are so many options for creating a background, and you can easily change a background on a sketch to whatever you have that fills that same space as a whole. In the case of this layout, I went with one of my favorite shapes, hexagons. I absolutely love hexagons. One of the main reasons I went with hexagons is that it is a shape that interlocks together. So I could create one whole piece, one background made up of several small individual shapes. Squares would be another great option if you still wanted a background that is connected in that way. You could also use any shape like stars, hearts, circles, flowers, butterflies, or arrows, and arrange them side by side in a grid-like pattern. They don't have to interlock or touch each other like I have these hexagons. I was just looking for a shape that gave me that solid background piece. I saw the hexagon design and the outdoorsy feel of the papers and wanted to create kind of a cozy quilt-like look. You can probably see right away that my background is slightly larger than the background of the strips on the sketch. My main concern wasn't necessarily about getting the background to be the exact same size as the background on the sketch. I was looking more towards the background having equal margins between the hexagons and the edges of the layout to maintain that balance on the layout. I want the margins from the hexagon to the top of the layout and the hexagon to the bottom of the layout to be the same, and the same goes for the hexagons and to the left and right edges. I want those two margins to be the same. All of this came down to the size of the hexagon I was using and finding that centered placement for them. I used a 1.5 inch hexagon punch to punch out all of the background pieces. And to start my placement of them and to ensure an even balance on my layout, I started right in the middle of my layout. I know that if I place a column of hexagons right smack in the middle of my layout, that as I add the hexagons towards the left and right edges, I'm going to have that same balanced design on both sides of the layout. So to start, I placed a column of hexagons in the center. I didn't adhere them yet. I'm just trying to find the measured height of the column so that I can center it between the top and bottom of the layout. I used my ruler to make a mark where the top hexagon will go and where the bottom hexagon will go so that they are perfectly centered between the top and bottom of the layout. And the reason I use a ruler to make a mark on both top and bottom is that I don't use a full column of hexagons. I didn't want to spend time adhering hexagons that are going to be covered by photos anyway. So next I cut the hexagons in half since they are split between the two pages. Then I line them up with the pencil marks and adhere them to the cardstock base. Now that I have those pieces in place, I can fill in the rest of the hexagons. I do suggest, if you are doing this, that as you are adding the hexagons, you get a ruler and here and there double check your placements and make sure you are staying even. If you have one that's even just a little bit off, it can throw all of them off as you keep going. So it's a good idea to just have that ruler handy and check from time to time. This is another layout that uses photos that I already had on hand. I had this set of photos printed in 3x3 inch, so I used two 3x3 inch photos in place of each 3x5 inch photo on the sketch. I didn't have to make any adjustments as far as the width because it is the same as the 3x5 inch photo. However, the combined height of the two 3x3 inch photos did add an extra inch over the 3x5 inch photos on the sketch. Usually an extra inch doesn't cause a need for a lot of extra adjustments for it to fit, and if it does, it's usually nothing major. The good thing is that my background is already larger than the background on the sketch, so even though I added that extra inch of height to the photos, it's not covering up too much of the background. You still get to see plenty of that background hexagon design. Because of the change in photo height, I had to change the measurements of the 6x5 inch rectangle piece. What works out perfectly is that it changed that piece to a 6x6 inch square instead, and I just so happen to be using 6x6 papers for this layout. Whenever I am using smaller pieces like these hexagons, I like to use 6x6 inch papers because the design and the pattern on the papers have been reduced down in size as well. So you can actually see more of the pattern even when using small pieces of it. Just like the first layout, I ended up using a 3x3 inch photo in place of the top two 2x2 inch photos. I only had one more picture to use, and like I said earlier, all of my photos were printed as 3x3 inch, and it's a family photo and we were filling it to the edges, so I couldn't really crop it down any further. Plus I liked that it was slightly larger since I needed to use it in place of two smaller photos. I shuffled around and changed up the elements on the 6x6 inch piece. Having the larger height of photo takes up a little bit more room, and I had created a larger title. So I moved them around to find an arrangement that fit. I also took a very minimal approach to embellishments. This layout has so many patterns and details in the background, and I felt like adding embellishments on top of that would just be too much. I like the idea of keeping it simple here. I did add a few like teeny tiny little hexagons in a contrasting cardstock to the background. I used foam adhesive to give them a little dimension, and a few of them have these tiny little star stickers on them. With this layout, we are starting to get into some bigger changes. The first is that I used 4x6 inch photos in place of the 3x5 inch photos, and I extended them all the way to the left and right edges of the layout. It's still the same amount of photos as the sketch, they're just slightly larger. I used a large star in place of the 6x5 inch rectangle piece behind the title, journaling, and smaller photos. I really liked the idea of using a large shape there, and when I came across this super cute Shine Bright cut file, I knew that this would be a really good fit for this design. I absolutely love adding large shapes to sketch designs to get a completely different look. You can oftentimes use a large shape in place of any larger background piece. Some shapes are more difficult to use than others because if you cover too much of it up, you start to lose what the shape is. So you definitely have to take that into consideration, and you might have to adjust other things on the layout to accommodate that shape. The star I used is quite a bit bigger than the rectangle piece on the sketch, but since I extended the photos to the edges, this gave me an 8-inch wide open section between the photos to work with. Plus, I could go pretty big with the star, and only a small portion would overlap onto my photo on the left. I tilted it to make sure that these points on the star were not covering up my son's face. To add a lot of detail and framing so that the star would really stand out, I have 4 layers of stars here. The largest one is cardstock. The second is slightly smaller and cut from a pattern paper. The third is the yellow that is cut to fit the 4th star, the white Shine Bright frame. It sounds like a lot, but it was really easy to put it all together. I also decided to add an extra background piece behind the star pieces to help it really pop out and grab attention. Since the star is so big, I used a bigger background piece. I cut an 8x12 inch strip of this star pattern so that it would cover this gap between the photos and go from top to bottom of the layout. I also added a stripe strip on the left and right of this piece. I don't know why, but I like to use stripe strips to frame big pieces like this. It's a weird little design quirk that I have. I think I have quite a few of these little quirks. When it came to the vertical strips on the sketch, I still used them, but changed them up slightly. This paper collection is from My Mind's Eye. It's an older one, but it will always be one of my all-time favorite boy collections. I absolutely love the colors of it. And one of my favorite papers in the collection is this arrow design that you can see that I used for my vertical strips. I used smaller strips than suggested on the sketch because I cut the arrow strips as they are on the paper instead of cutting by a measurement. I wanted these pieces to be individual arrow strips. I also cut along the arrow design to create the point at the top and then the little notch on the bottom. When I added them to the layout, I arranged them at different heights just to kind of change things up a little bit. These strips ended up covering roughly the same area as the strips on the sketch. They're just different in width and design. I again removed that bottom 2x2 inch photo. This was mainly due to the title on the star. It's so large that I just didn't feel like I had the space to place that photo where I felt it should be, and I didn't want to cover any of the title. To help this title stand out, I added some yellow stickles to the centers of each letter. I felt like it was kind of a good fit for that shine bright theme. At the top, I did keep the two 2x2 inch photos and arranged them near my title and my journaling. To finish the design, I added a few layered stars around the photos and the title, and then I have some stars down here on the arrow strips as well. This is one of those layouts that at first glance you might say this looks nothing like the sketch. What in the world was she thinking? The changes I made here all revolve around taking the photos and the strips and rearranging them to get a completely different look. The end result covers close to the same area as the sketch does, and a lot of the same elements are still there, used in the same way. One of my first ideas with this sketch was that I wanted to remove the 6x5 inch piece and the 3 vertical 2x8 inch strips behind it and replace it with a 6x8 inch photo. Occasionally I like to use an enlargement. They are one of the best ways to highlight a favorite photo, and usually you can make a few adjustments, maybe remove a few elements, and work an enlargement into any sketch design. Because that 6x5 inch piece also has the title, journaling, embellishments, and some smaller photos, I had to find a photo that had some empty space in it so I could still add those elements on top without taking away from the subject in the photo. I didn't worry about adding the 2x2 inch photos since there's already a large photo in their place. For the rest of the photos, I replaced all of the 3x5 inch photos with 2 3x2.5 inch photos. The two photos combined take up the same space as a 3x5 inch photo, so I didn't make any extra adjustments for those photo sizes. Anytime you want to include more photos than you see on a sketch, try using 2 or more smaller photos in place of 1 larger photo. Now we are getting to the part where things really kind of took a change. I absolutely love creating water themed designs. I have always loved the water and swimming, so I'm assuming it's got something to do with that. One of my go-to designs for water pages is creating wave strips with a circle punch. They are super easy to make and so much fun to layer on top of each other to create these water designs. To do this, you cut a strip of pattern paper. I usually cut mine to be around 3/4 inch to 1 inch wide, but you can always adjust that to fit your design. Then you turn your circle punch upside down so that you can see what you are punching. And then you punch little half circles along the edge of the strip, creating that wave design. I punch mine at different heights to create different depths of waves. I knew that I wanted to create these wave strips for this layout, but I ran into a problem since the sketch has vertical strips and I needed horizontal strips. The strips might not translate to wave strips if they are going up and down and not across the page. So my easy solution was to use horizontal strips in place of the vertical strips. Most of the time, you can easily swap out the orientation of background strips on a sketch. You might have to make some adjustments here and there, but as long as they are covering close to the same general area, it should work. The second issue I ran into with the wave strips is that the strips on the sketch show above and below the photos. I liked the idea of creating a scene with this design and wanted my wave strips to only show at the bottom of the photos. I wanted it to almost look like an extension of the water in my photos. Sometimes I can be very literal in my design concepts when it comes to a theme heavy or a scene design like this. I like it to be fun, but with some realistic order applied. In this case, I'm using my water strips to fill in the water in the photos. I told you guys, I got some quirks. I can't help it. Don't judge me. To accommodate this design, I moved my photos up and used the empty space below for all of my layered wave strips. I left just enough space to add a stripe strip to the top and the bottom to complete this whole block. On the sketch, the strips extend past the photos on the left and right sides. I didn't extend my strips beyond the photo towards the left and right edges because I liked the look better with the strips ending where the photos did and keeping this whole design as one big even block. To help the individual wave strips stand out, I added some stitching near the edges and then ran my fingernail along the wave edge to rough it up a little and expose some of that white core of the paper. It really helps that wave design stand out. I always call my kids fish when they swim. When I was a kid, I lived at the swimming pool. It was one of my favorite things to do, and my elementary principal knew that and always called me fish every day at school. It always made my day, and so naturally when my kids developed that same love for swimming, I passed the name down to them. So to give a little special kind of hidden message on the layout, I used fish to embellish the waves. I really like adding little thoughtful details like that to my layouts. I hope that someday my kids will realize that I've put these little details when they look at these pages and remember those moments. The last change I made to the sketch was adding a 24 by 12 inch background to the layout. So I cut the white paper down to fit so that I would have this edge around the layout. I originally had not planned to do this, but I felt like the white space plus the extra white in the background of the photos was borderline too much for me. So I added this dark blue background and a stitch border to help kind of break up that stark whiteness a little bit. I love white space, but sometimes I like it in smaller doses. It just depends on the layout, the pictures, the design, and to me, I just really liked the look of this layout more with that small edge of blue around the layout. The last layout is always about changing the size of the layout. I like to show that you can use a 2-page sketch to create a 1-page layout or a 1-page sketch to create a 2-page layout. And it's actually really easy to do. To convert the 2-page sketch to this 1-page layout, I mostly focused on the main design elements. The photos arranged in a straight line and then the vertical background strips. That is what I grabbed from the sketch and used on this layout. Typically, one of the best ways to replicate a 2-page sketch on a 1-page layout is to shrink the photos. I used 3 2.5 by 3.5 inch photos in place of the 3 by 5 inch photos. They are still vertical photos and they are still arranged in the same line across the layout. They are just slightly smaller to fit the smaller layout size. I only had 3 photos that I wanted to use, so I eliminated the 6 by 5 inch rectangle piece and instead placed my title above the photos and my journaling below the photos. I still wanted to keep those elements close and tight to the photos and the design. I used 1/2 inch strips instead of the 2-inch strips on the sketch. If I had used the 2-inch size, I wouldn't have been able to fit very many on my page, and I wanted to work in lots of different colors into this layout. If you ever want to include more patterns or colors, a good option is to use a smaller width of strips. You can use 2 1/2 inch strips in place of a 1-inch strip, or 2 1-inch strips in place of a 2-inch strip. There are many different smaller strips you can use to fill the same space. You can also play around with using a variety of widths. Maybe some 1-inch strips mixed with a few 1/2 inch strips, or 1/4 inch strips, or 3/4 inch strips. There's really a lot you can do to change up the look of strips. When it came to adding in some extra design details, this is where I had a lot of fun with this layout. I always enjoy finding little ways to incorporate the theme of my layout into the design. And I'm not talking about using themed supplies or embellishments. I'm talking about creating design elements that tie into the theme. At first, I thought this design would be great for making birthday candle strips for the background strips. I was going to put a little flame at the top of each strip for like a fun play on this birthday theme of my layout. But then it popped in my head that maybe I could mimic the party horn at the bottom of my strips to go along with the photos of my son blowing a party horn or noisemaker or whatever you call those things. Loud, that's what I call them. To create this party horn design, I rolled up a coordinating piece of paper and adhered it to the end of each strip. I didn't just roll up the ends of the strips because they are double-sided papers, and I really wanted the pattern on the rolled section to match the pattern on the strip. It just didn't have the same effect to me when there were 2 different colors or patterns showing. I wanted it to all match and look the same. This does create a little bit more of a bulky design, so I tried to smash them down enough so that they were no taller than a piece of foam adhesive. They kind of popped back up, but I think over time they will kind of smash down and not be so tall. To finish my party theme, I added some hand-stitched swirls and some confetti all around the layout. So this wraps up the layouts for Sketch Support Episode 4 and brings us to the Sketch Support Challenge. The challenge is to use the free sketch I have used in this video as inspiration to create your own layout. There will be a Sketch Support Challenge post on my Facebook page that will be pinned at the top of the page. I'll link to that down below so that you can find it. After you create your layout, you will go to that post on Facebook and in the comments, post a picture of your layout. The fun part for me is that I once again get to admire all of your layouts. I had so much fun seeing what you guys have created in previous challenges. The fun part for you is that I will randomly select one person to receive $20 in downloadable sketches. I'll let you choose which ones you want. That way you can mix and match and pick whichever ones you want, just in case you already have some. You can also pick out classes or ebooks. I'll leave that option completely up to you. You'll have a month to complete a layout and post it on the Sketch Support Challenge post on Facebook. Then on June 22nd, I'll announce the winner. So head to scrapbookgeneration.com, grab that sketch, and get to creating. I look forward to seeing what you guys do with this one. I think it's going to be a good one. Thank you so much for watching, and see you guys next time.